here today at the climate protests in London. Let me see if I can find someone to chat with. Excuse me, sir, what's your name?
Tarquin Merriweather.
Would you mind coming and have a sit down for a minute and have a chat with me?
I'd love to, I'm tired.
Tell me, Tarquin, why are you here today?
Well, the use of peat. All those people using peat in their compost.
Well, why? Why are you protesting?
Well, digging all that peat up, it releases carbon dioxide, doesn't it? And endangers the wildlife and it ruins all the archaeological sites.
Do you know how much peat actually covers the UK?
Well, no, but can't be that much, can it?
Well, the UK is about 25 million hectares and peatland makes up 3 million, so it's about an eighth. 41% of that is semi-natural still, but it's been affected by human activities such as drainage and burn management and livestock grazing and peat for fuel. 16% is covered by woodland, the majority of which is drained, so it's no longer peat really, is it? 15% is agricultural, cropland, grassland, mainly in the lowland regions of the UK, like the Fens and the Norfolk Broads. Manchester mosses is one of them. Oh, and the Somerset Levels ain't too far from me. Industrial peat for horticulture uses 0.15% of the UK peatland area, and most of that is on lowland raised bogs.
Well, that's not a lot, is it? But all that CO2's been released.
So do you think that every single bit of peatland in the UK is going to be dug up and release its CO2? The peat used for growing media makes up 0.12% of UK's CO2 emissions. That's 3 2,500ths as a fraction. And this is already falling. It's dropped considerably since 2020. And horticulture is the only industry being targeted to achieve zero emissions. And don't forget that the peat used in horticulture is used to grow plants. And plants help to bring down the CO2.
Yeah, but the peatland's gone forever.
You need to get your facts right before you start protesting. Peatland grows back at 2 millimetres a year. The peatlands in Canada, which supply nearly all of North America, are growing back 20% faster than they're harvested.
Well, okay then. What about the damage to wildlife?
Well, yeah, the wildlife quoted in most of the reports is from pristine bogs. Pristine bogs are not used for peat extraction. Most of them are sites of special scientific interest. The nightjar, the great heath butterfly, the bog bush cricket and the mire pill beetle. Well, the nightjar is a heathland bird. It only lives where it does because the peat bogs have already been excavated. Yeah, the butterfly does live in wet areas and it will only increase once the peat extraction sites are re-wetted. The cricket is a dry heathland animal again, and it benefits from the gaps between the peat bogs. And the pill beetle, well, that only occurs in 3 places in the UK, and they're all in South Yorkshire.
Oh, you're confusing me now with all your facts.
So is that not what the people who are opposed to peat have already done to you?
Right, then, all right. So what about all the historical, all the archaeological digs they're digging up and ruining?
The archaeological argument is irrelevant. They reckon only 2% of sites have been damaged by digging up peat, and they wouldn't know the sites were there if they hadn't dug for the peat in the first place. All that archaeology is lying beneath us and we don't even know it's there.
So why can't we use cocoa coir and other compost?
Importing coir and other materials from abroad? Virtue signalling at its worst. Ecological, economical madness. Most of the coir from abroad has a very, very high salt content, and this needs to be washed in fresh water. A precious commodity in the places where the coir comes from. They can't afford to lose their fresh water to satisfy our coir needs. And do you know what they used to use the coir for before it was shipped to the UK? They used to put it round the trees. They used to mulch the ground with it, and now the soils over there are becoming denuded and barren. None of the viable substitutes hold water very well, the wood chips and the barks. You have to water more, the water washes out. Water washes out, takes the fertiliser with it. You have to add more fertiliser. Fertiliser washes into the water courses. Well, we don't want that, do we? And conversely, the other type of materials being used, the green waste, the digestates, they hold too much water. And the plants suffer, the roots get damaged, lack of oxygen, and so on. To quote Pippa Greenwood, the pest and disease expert, she said she had huge amounts of blight and grey mould on her tomatoes as a result of increased humidity with the non-peat based composts. And highly professional commercial growers report massive losses with the plants compared to those grown in peat. Tarquin, come back, I'm finished. Well, there you are then. Some people just don't want to listen. Okay guys, just a little light-hearted look at the peat fiasco really. But every response I made was from sources who have no interest whatsoever in promoting peat use in horticulture. They're all from like scholarly articles and things like that. Whereas the ones Tarquin was putting across are all from people who don't want to use peat. The peat consultation, was it last year? It was very one-sided in that the questions were all about how to go about the peat ban, not whether people wanted to carry on with peat in whatever form. This led to frustration amongst many as they had to select an answer they did not want to select in any way, shape or form, and any comment they wanted to make could only be added as free text in some sections. Hence NGOs like RHS, RSPB, WWF, Local Wildlife Trust, Woodland Trust, bit of irony there, they had a big say, where those opposed to the ban or wanting a different solution were either ignored or did not submit a response. One definite response to this was, well, you had your chance but did not act, hence the consultation. But the comeback to that was, well, peat usage is down by 17% voluntarily from 2020 and still falling. And unlike this, many say, why not let the big box stores and the garden centres play green, but allow a choice of peat to those who want to use it? The Horticultural Trade Association reports on how UK tree targets may be lost due to bad compost. They reckon £1.6 billion worth of trees and plants destined to help the green agendas, having to use peat-free compost may lead to losses of up to 85% from UK growers, either from dieback or the trade cutting back on their losses and not filling their quotas or even closing down altogether, and the increased nutrient cost and plant care cost. Oh dear me. And they also say there may be a greater risk of never getting the trade back. And a bit of unfair competition as well. Some countries like Germany, Switzerland, Finland are increasing their peat usage, while the Netherlands is not stopping at all, but changing to a green extraction scheme. Other trade associations, including the National Farmers Union, say things like green waste can be unstable, requiring a lot of work to get the mix right, and of course there are pathogenic and chemical contamination risks with composted green waste material, unless it's from an entirely clean source, which can never be guaranteed. Well, we all know the risk from aminopyralids and clopyralids, don't we? Which I had on 2022 with my tomatoes. Every alternative to peat is also a byproduct of another process, and so it is dependent on that process. The cost of peat-free alternatives, 15 to 20% higher than peat, which in itself is a challenge for the industry. A lot of this stinks a bit of trying to do right, but doing it wrong. Just think of the Dr. Beeching railway cuts back in the 60s. All done with the best intentions, but it achieved absolutely nothing, apart from cause devastation to many seaside resorts and towns, and small communities. Electric vehicles, well, you'll be able to judge more than me whether this works, because I'll be long gone by the time it's fully in. But many have been caught out just this last week with the very cold weather. An EV car's mileage reduced by up to 18%. And while there's enough spare electric in the national grid to supply the chargers, many will not have access to ones in their own home and have to use public ones at a greater cost to themselves. Unless a card scheme's introduced, something like people who can't have a charger, like in a block of flats, they get a card and they can scan the card on a public charger and get domestic rates. But all that's a story for another day. Take care, guys.